Hoaxes about Islamophobia, homophobia, fake racist, attacking black actors for money. What the heck's going on in the United States of America? The oligarchs of Twitter, Google, YouTube, Facebook, they're all attacking conservatives and censoring our thoughts. Well, tonight's guest will help us sift through all the baloney and get to the bottom of what citizens can do to stop this craziness and help bring our society together. So get strapped in. This is the Rob Manus Show. Hoaxes about racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, to include elaborate fake violence schemes, the powerful bullying the weak, massive funding for organizations to smear anyone who won't toe the line, censoring on social media by the oligarchs of Twitter, Facebook, and Google. All this against not only the well known personality who disagrees publicly, but also average citizens and anyone else not with them. You know them, the Democrat socialists, the liberals, the progressives, the propaganda mainstream media's anti America, and an endless anti constitutional funding infrastructure of organizations. The fake narrative building goes on and on. Unbelievable hypocrisy in their political party and media machinery. The entire senior elected leadership team of the state of Virginia has extreme views on killing babies born alive from abortion, racist backgrounds, or serious sexual assault allegations against them, and they are still in office weeks after the stories broke. In the context of a society that insisted on hearing false sexual assault accusations into the Supreme Court nomination process of now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, the disappearance of the Virginia Three in the media narrative is telling. The bright light of truth spotlight only applies to those of us who disagree with them. Voters have also elected two Muslim women to Congress, Omar from Minnesota and Tlaib from Michigan. In a country as great as the United States, with our foundation of religious freedom, this shouldn't be an issue for us. But these two elected officials are on powerful committees, foreign affairs and oversight, respectively, and their policy views are extreme. Omar, for her part, has had to apologize for anti Semitic remarks, is in the hot seat again for new comments, and is unapologetic. Tlaib openly accused a prominent colleague in a publicly televised committee hearing of racist tokenism, only to be shouted down and forced to retract her comments by her own party leadership. This is where we are in America today. But is there anything we can do to reorient our society to liberty so every citizen of any political view can live free from violence, hoaxes, smear campaigns, and censorship? Tonight's guest is doing exactly that, doing something about the horrendous society we seem to live in today. He not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. His Twitter account, pinned tweet, tells his story. My track record since the disastrous GOP midterms: Stop the Steal, Culture, HuffPo, ADL tried taking me out, saved the hashtag Covington Boys, launched the hashtag Verified Bullies, sued Gavin versus the SPLC, broke Virginia Democrats, going after Omar, and got Twitter to unsuspend my account. Please welcome my friend Ali Alexander, and a leader, a philosopher, an activist who does things to end the despicable behavior from once proud American institutions like the free press, elected officials, and the powerful. So, Ali, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's good to be in the trenches with you, whether it's on the field or on the web now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been following your shows and your teachings on the Periscope and those kind of things for quite a while now. But I've really been impressed with what your action, what you're physical and leadership actions have accomplished. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to. Start with the Stop the Steal effort. I don't think a lot of people realize that the I believe it was the Senate and the governor's elections in Florida really they attempted to steal those from the Republican winners, didn't they?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was predicting that we would expand our Senate majority and lose our House majority. I even came up with a worksheet for my live stream followers and to follow along with that night. And, Republicans, we took a shellacking. But that night, we were watching the slow steal of the Florida election. And they were just going to steal it all out of Palm Beach County and there in Broward County, the infamous county there in Florida, where so much weird stuff has absolutely happened. And I went on Periscope that night, and I think about 10,000 people tuned in within a couple of hours, and I asked the question, why aren't y'all in the streets? Does anyone care about fair elections anymore? Where is the RNC? Where's the GOP? Where is the NRSC? Where is the RGA? These are all committees that raise millions and millions of dollars to help not just incumbents, but target seats. And, I was just like, this is a bad night. And while we were watching the theft go on in Florida, it went on in Orange County, California, which is a very Republican area. Now it's entirely represented by Democrat members of Congress and, of course, 2 Democrat senators. We watched the theft in Arizona, where the GOP governor wasn't on the same page with the Arizona GOP. And then we watched the attempted steal in the Georgia gubernatorial race between Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. So, I was alarmed. I was incensed about it. And as soon as I got done with Periscope, my friend Jack Posobiec called me and he said, so I'm going to Poland, which means you're going to Florida. And I said, I'm not going to Florida. He's like, you're going to Florida. And I was like, no, somebody in Florida needs to do this. And, I gave it a couple of hours. We called our network, which is pretty extensive, right? And nobody was available who knew how media worked, who knew how Tea Party activists organized, and knew how the local GOP party functioned, and who could go out there and navigate an organic protest that wasn't funded by the Koch brothers or whatever, the left wants to assail us as, tomorrow. And so the next day I got on a flight with an activist friend of mine who would run the comms operation of it. I riled up 150 activists very quickly, and we put together a team. We fundraised about $10,000, and that paid for the flights, that paid for the gas, the food, the rental car. A good friend of mine put us up 45 minutes away. We worked with Laura Loomer on her journalistic effort to expose sunlight, but my job was to get down there and show people that if you, shine light on our bureaucrats, they will scurry away like roaches. And what happened is they were going to move the governor's race into a recount. We got that stopped. They eventually declared Ron DeSantis the governor, and now he's the governor with the highest approval rating of all the GOP governors, I believe. And we helped make sure that Rick Scott became the United States senator. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough sunlight, and to prove what we did worked in Florida is, Rob, we lost the Arizona Senate race. A federal judge inside of Georgia said that we needed to let people vote after the election for Stacey Abrams. And then they ultimately stole the agriculture commissioner's race in Florida because we weren't able to give it the attention it deserved. We stopped the steal in Florida, and we did that on the backs of a Twitter hashtag, crowd fundraising, and 150 patriots who said, Ali, I've never protested, and stood out there with me for 12 hours each day for about 5 days. And we sweated and we sweated and we sweated, but we were able to put eyes on the ground when there were ballot tags outside of the Board of Elections office. We were able to photograph that, make that go viral. When we found ballot boxes at the Florida airport, Laura Loomer was able to get down there. I was able to get down there with my team. We had sources work with us inside of the Avis car rental where the ballot boxes were found. We had members of law enforcement tip us off to games that Sheriff Israel, from the Parkland shooting, what he was playing. I mean, it's a really, really corrupt place. It actually reminds me a lot of some parts of Louisiana. It was another thing. And I've been doing this for 12 years. I've namely worked inside the Republican Party and the conservative movement, but these past 2 years have absolutely changed me. I've become kind of the consultant of the people, the lobbyist of the people, teaching MAGA what it is we grassroots conservatives have been dealing with, since we started the Tea Party, and it's been an honor of a lifetime. And I thought, okay, well, I'm on my way out, and little did I know that God would provide me these unique battles in which I could use my strategic experience and my unique insight to empower people who don't know anything about the system that governs them.
And I'm very, very, very proud to have you as a friend, but also as a colleague in this. And I feel that our country is fortunate when people like you and Laura Loomer, who I've had on my show already, are able to come together and build that synergy and then work with actual citizens on the ground. Because I've run for office before. The reason why I was encouraged to run for office wasn't because of some big Republican establishment people or even Republican outsiders or any donors. It was because the grassroots people that had built the Tea Party were so frustrated that their organization was taken over really by the establishment Republicans, and in some cases even some Democrats and libertarians, and they still feel frustrated. So I am so glad that we're fortunate enough that you have made this change, and God put that step in front of you, because I personally I watched the Stop the Steal effort, supported it. I think we got millions of Americans to see that. I wish that we had had more teams to be able to put out in the ballot harvesting area of Orange County, because I'm convinced that they did steal those elections out there. I'm also convinced that they stole the election in Arizona from Martha McSally. I'm also convinced that had we given them the opportunity and not intervened in Georgia, they would have stolen that gubernatorial election. So thank God that he put that step out there for you. But we've had some other things happen since those elections, Ollie. One of the ones that stands out are two names in the U.S. Congress, Rashida Tlaib and the most notorious Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. Tlaib's from Michigan. And then, of course, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, COC. I got your name right because I respect you. I respect and admire you, Ms. AOC, because you have been able to do things that other grassroots candidates have not been able to do, and some things we actually agree on, like fighting your establishment political parties. So we've had those happen, but the big concern that I hear every day from citizens and that I'm being attacked by the left on even today, right now, is that when Omar gets in front of the Council on American and Islamic Relations National Conference out in California and makes political ideology comments based from political Islam instead of from the Muslim religion. There are two different things, and most Americans don't have that level of education that you and I have to know that there are two different things. It's political Islam that we must fight against, and it's political Islam that I push back on Omar and Tlaib on. And when they say things like, well, the 9/11 tragedy was done by some people, instead of calling out those jihadis and those political Islamists for what they were and the supporters of them for who they were, that builds concern. And Omar in particular stands out because she's on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives, which means she's getting sensitive intelligence information about our war efforts, which unfortunately we're still fighting a war that the Islamists, the political Islamists, started with us, and we're not going to just walk away from it. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing to counteract the issues with especially those two, if not those three. I call them the Jihad Caucus, and I include AOC in that because she supports a lot of what they say from political Islam.
Yeah, I mean, what they all have in common is that they're certainly progressives, and they want to fundamentally transform America and frankly bastardize it more than it already has been. I mean, it was absolutely pillaged, and to steal something out of the Kavanaugh hearings, it was gang raped. America was gang raped. Lady Liberty was gang raped, and now we're looking at Lady Justice with the Jussie Smollett stuff. She was gang raped, and I don't think that that's an exaggeration. We are fighting a system in which there are no absolutes. Everything is relative. It's postmodernism run amok, and now with progressivism, they're accelerating us to the point where they're attempting to gaslight us to make us the bigots, but we're not the bigots. You and I happen to be, men of our Christian faith. But yeah, we understand, we're fighting a radical ideology in parts of this dictate of Islam, but that doesn't make us hate Muslims. I actually think that there ought to be Muslim members of Congress. I think there ought to be everybody across the spectrum that represent any given people. I'd rather people be elected on merit, really, over identity, but I think that all identities should be represented in our representative form of democracy. But what's very, very, to steal a term from the left, problematic, what's problematic about Ilhan Omar in particular is that she seems to be deceiving people at every twist and turn, from the accusations that she's married her brother, which look completely true. They are true. To the campaign violations that she had when she ran for office, both for the state legislature and for federal office, facing fines for those, and then the comments she's made about the Jewish people or the state of Israel. I think that you ought to be able to be critical of politics and lobbying power, and especially foreign lobbying powers. I think you ought to be able to be critical of even our allies. But the tropes that Ilhan Omar has rolled out there. This is a 37-year-old woman. She's not, AOC, who's, in her late 20s. No, Ilhan Omar is someone who has seen the world, knows her ideology, knows politics. She served on the staff side of politics. She was a campaign staffer, then a senior policy advisor, then a member of the Minnesota State Legislature, then a member of Congress. This isn't an idiot. In fact, I would contend that it is racist, it is bigoted, it is Islamophobic to attribute having a low IQ to a woman of her pedigree and her intellect. What she is doing is she is purposefully gaslighting the American people in an attempt to make us look bad. But she is the jihadist. She is the political jihadist who wants to do away with our allies. She wants to move, the Democrats from a bipartisan agreement with conservatives that we ought to have a strong relationship with democracies in the Middle East. And yes, that includes the Holy Land and Israel, to turning it into something that looks like the Hamas caucus. And I just think that this is outrageous and that she ought to be challenged. And we ought to do so with the ferociousness that we are guarding the truth. And, people are going to call us all type of names, and we ought to respond to and articulate what our accurate thoughts are. And that's that we don't hate Muslims. We hate this political, radical jihad that is stemming from some forms of Islam. And what the truth of the matter is that ISIS and other terrorist organizations around the United States recruit more people from Minneapolis, Minnesota than New York, or Chicago, Illinois, or LA, California. There is a problem in a community that has not assimilated. And that's why I took a crew up there a couple of weeks ago, and we made a 25-minute documentary for culture.com, culturewith3ts.com. And I directed my first film. It was called Importing Ilhan. And we tracked down her house, and no one's living there. We tracked down her office. No one works there. This woman is deceptive to her core, much like AOC and Rashida Tlaib. I actually have less of a problem with Rashida Tlaib of the three. I think that, and like you, I admire that AOC. She does represent a base of the Democrats. It's a base that you and I probably believe, poses an existential threat to America. But we ought to debate that, not censor that. We ought to debate that. And so I'm glad AOC is in Congress. I'm glad that the Democrats are being exposed for the ideologies where they actually get their funding, be it from CARE or George Soros or some of these other radical hate groups like the SPLC. And so I'm really happy that she's in Congress. And you got to admire the game. You can hate the player, but you got to admire the game. And AOC's got game. And Ilhan Omar absolutely ought to be removed from the Foreign Affairs Committee. That is the decision that Nancy Pelosi alone gets to decide. And I think that for the good of Jews everywhere, of an ally in Israel, and Americans that want a fair debate and not a radical debate, that Ilhan Omar ought to take her anti-Israel, anti-Jew, anti-American comments to the House floor and not in the committee of the House Foreign Affairs. And I think that that's a reasonable, nuanced position, and that they would paint us like radicals shows us how afraid they are of debate.
Oh, I totally agree. And, they may wonder why we ferociously fight back on this. But I'll tell you this, Ali, and some other people know, but for those that do not, I survived the attack on the Pentagon on 9/11. My family survived anthrax. They survived that attack. They survived the sniper attacks. And then we went out, and I went back to the field, and I commanded bomber squadrons that went into the war and helped fight the war in the war on terror against what's now ISIS, Al Qaeda, and those kind of things. And I will ferociously fight back against Ilhan Omar, just as I ferociously fought back until December 1st, 2011, when I wore the country's uniform against these Islamists, these political Islamists that want to bring Sharia supremacy and Islamist political ideology into the United States of America. It's not compatible with our constitutional system or with liberty, and I will fight it just as if I was wearing a uniform, and I'm going to do it through my communications capability. And if I get called upon, of course I would go to the defense of my nation, because I'm an American citizen and I believe in the Second Amendment if I'm called upon. That you mentioned one of the next things that I want to talk about, Ali, and this is what drove me to ask you to come on the show in the first place, is the whole Covington High School fiasco, and how those boys, these are boys,
Yeah.
I entered
Yeah.
the military when I was 17. I was a man the day I took the oath of office. I understand that. But these were boys. These were 16-year-old and younger boys. They were completely obliterated by the media, the left-wing media especially, but not just them. A lot of people caught on to this. And then you mentioned Jussie Smollett and the fake MAGA supporter attack on him. That could have incited massive riots in Chicago and massive harm and even death to civilians and citizens that didn't know what was going on. All of those things could have done that, especially with our society the way it is today. And then you have recently in the news, you mentioned one of my least favorite organizations in the United States, the Southern Poverty Law Center. And Gavin McInnes, I consider him a friend of mine, and I haven't agreed with everything he's ever said, but I've been on his radio show before, but his voice has been squelched because he has been, I think, incorrectly and viciously and despicably smeared and maligned as some kind of white supremacist Klansman that sends people out to beat people of color up, and it's just not true. And I'm glad to see that you're starting some efforts to fight back against those guys. Lead us through that, and how can people help you win that fight?
It's funny. I actually, the creative director for culture.com, culture3ts.com, he said, Ollie, you're turning into the right's Al Sharpton. And I was like, oh, and he's like, not scammy. And it is weird that I have found myself, sweating in Southern Florida. I have found myself in Montgomery, Alabama, announcing our lawsuit against the SPLC with Gavin McInnes and our two lawyers that we're working with, and this has been a tremendous honor and privilege. And then with the Covington boys, I worked with 16 families, me and young CJ Pearson, a superstar in his own right. We aided 16 families, and now we're working with 4 different law firms representing 60 families there. And I will tell you, these guys, they're my brothers in Christ. And I really felt, my younger brother is 7 years. My youngest brother is 7 years my junior. And, I perpetually forget that he's not 19 or he's not 21. And when I watch these kids get maligned, I'm actually standing in an apartment in LA, and I'm sitting there thinking, and I have part of my team surrounding me, and they're like, Ali, we can't touch this story. There's a Native American gentleman. There's apparently some black activists, and these are white kids, and all the facts say that they're guilty. And I said, there's something that doesn't sit right with me. And we sat there in silence, and I was going through my head. It's like I said, I have 12 years of experience of fighting on the front lines of so many of these political battles, helped co-found the Tea Party movement. And it occurred to me that this situation looked like a couple of other situations. And so I went back and I looked and I said, well, okay, wait, why does the footage start here? And what's this? And wait, what is the harm? I was like, what if the worst case scenario, this kid, Nick Salmon, is laughing, is smirking? What if he is defiantly, what would be wrong with yelling, build that wall? If it's a chant to a Native American, no one's talking about keeping out Native Americans or veterans. And I said, I didn't tell my team what I decided. I called CJ and I said, CJ, we're going the opposite. I was like, I don't care. And, I don't mean, just for the sake of accuracy, Rob, it was everyone. It was international media. It was the biggest story since Kavanaugh, period. It was bigger than the midterm elections is how big it was. And National Review and Ben Shapiro and a bunch of other people, and I'm not meaning to talk bad on people on the right, but even CJ Pearson, had come out against them, and Charlie Kirk, and it got us all kind of wrapped up that, when there's overwhelming media saying these are the facts, a lot of us tend to believe them, even after Kavanaugh. And I think with the Covington boys situation, we realized we can never believe them. And I never dreamed in my career that I'd be saying something that sounds anti-intellectual or sounds, absolutist or archaic. But the fact is we can never believe them. And we went hardcore. 17,000 people tuned into my Periscope, and it was the rallying call. And again, it was like a call from God. Ali, do this, and I got your back. And in the next couple of hours, more facts came out, and we were, front and center. And people started putting me in touch with families. Crying mothers started calling me, DMing me, save us, save our families. And I realized I was not going to let. I'm getting chills right now. I was not going to let what happened to the boys at Duke, the Duke lacrosse team, happen to these boys. And a lot of people are like, well, Ali, they were proven innocent, and they still can't get jobs, and it still affected their career, and some of them got kicked out of college. So I wasn't going to let that happen. I said, this is a battle that is going to involve vindicating them, fighting aggressively for them, getting people fired, and suing people. And I was the first person in the country to suggest this was the way to make this stop. Punch the left in their nose. And, that's what ended up happening. And we're so happy to be a part of that process. We were the only people who collected the digital forensic evidence needed to aid them in these lawsuits. So I was very happy. We had a viral hashtag, verified bullies, and then that allowed us to launch verifiedbullies.com, where we're still keeping track of this data. We verified the data. We deduped it. We did all kinds of other stuff, super technical stuff with this data, handed it over to the law firms. And, we're still working. Lynn Wood is a fantastic lawyer out of Atlanta, Georgia, who represents Nick Salmon and his family. And, when Lynn got on the phone with me and CJ, he said, I just want y'all to know that, I had no idea that I was going to be called to help this case. And he said, but I was following you two on Twitter. What you guys were doing was saving the country. And that was really humbling. Here's one of the top, libel attorneys in the country who had no connection at all to Kentucky or this family. And then, after that GMA interview where Nick Salmon, tried to hold his own, but, couldn't under the barrage of media. And, those questions were so offensive. And Lynn was like, you guys, did this. And I said, after Kavanaugh, we have to take everything seriously. We're all up for grabs. It's, the media is anti-white. It is anti-Christian. It is anti-South. But I will tell you, I feared for, one day when I have children or my white friends or, my Christian community. And so, these kids have become, they're men really. These men have become, good friends of mine. I still talk to them on a every like 3-day basis, and they're shining lights too. They didn't want to become famous activists. They didn't want anything. They wanted it to go away, and they were willing to fight. And I've never seen this spiritual and emotional maturity out of a group of people. These people were called to do this suffering for all of us, that we might start changing the country. And so we're really excited about that. And then, weeks later, I'm caught up in, I get a call from a good friend of mine, Ron Coleman, who's one of the top First Amendment attorneys in the country. He's like, Ali, we've been waiting to work together for 10 years. Gavin McInnes is about to sue the SPLC. And he said, Gavin's, met you at some events and you guys kind of know each other, but, he wants, you to be the guy who's in charge of all the PR, doing his schedule, and then working with our legal team to manage the political aspect of this. And I was really impressed with the recognizing of now. Martin Luther King said, there's a fierce urgency for now. I call it a recognition of now. If you don't know that when you walk into the courtroom, there's a PR battle going on, there's a political battle going on, if you think this is all going to be handled by some law book, you have no idea what you're dealing with. And Gavin had done and said some stuff that I absolutely disagree with. But then what it turns out is 75% of the stuff that I thought I disagreed with, that Gavin said, he never actually said. And this SPLC organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, is not poor, does not represent the interests of the South, and really doesn't care about the legal battle. What they do is they work with Silicon Valley companies to deplatform people like me, deplatform people like you. And then if you happen to look a certain way, like Gavin McInnes, then they can successfully deplatform you. Meanwhile, Gavin is a Canadian immigrant married to a minority woman who is further left than you or I. And so it's just total flash. We flew down to Montgomery, Alabama. I've been there since 2010 working, and we got some local press. We put them on notice right outside of their headquarters, which looks absolutely demonic. I mean, you see this beautiful downtown that is Montgomery, and then there's this steel-looking building. It's like the Death Star, and that's the SPLC. And they're sitting on nearly $500 billion. There's no other political organization with this much money in the bank. And their sole job is to scare leftist old people into believing that there are Nazis and violent Ku Klux Klan members around the corner ready to pounce. And that's just not the case. So we're proud to be suing them. We put so much pressure on them that we're really happy to see, that we've got the founder fired, the president resigned, their top legal director walked out the door in frustration, and they're leaking like a leaky ship. And so we're standing to benefit from that. And not only that, we are dedicated to fighting in this case as long as it takes. And that's why we launched defendgavin.com to raise the necessary funds to pay the attorneys. This doesn't need to come out of Gavin's pockets, who's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, frankly. And so we've successfully raised, think about $227,000 in 2 months, working on an alternative media plan. And so I got to, as a professional, test a thesis that I had, and it turned out to be totally true, that if we go on alternative media instead of mainstream media, that the crowd would be there for us. Rob, people are hungry for the fight, from Stop the Steal to Covington to the SPLC. People are hungry to fight back. And I think that that's why movement conservatives like you and I, who may have not been on board with Trump during the primary, said, you know what, there's a new texture in America, and we've got to adapt to the satanic system that these progressives have created. And I think you and I are on the front line, and your viewers, frankly, for watching this.
I agree. And talk about shivers, the reason I wanted you to come on here is because you're inspiring. You just gave me that one more, another piece of inspiration, Ali, and I really do appreciate it. Go through the key sites now, starting with culture, real quick one time for my viewers to get to, and then we'll have to close it out.
Yeah, if you're looking for if you're looking for non-establishment, right of center kind of news that's cultural instead of political, go to culture.com. That's CULTTTUREE. So there's 3 T's. And then we do a lot of meta content. We're like the TMZ of the right. We like to focus on the people who are fighting the fights because I think that we've got a morale gap. And so I'm trying to fill that morale gap. So I launched this publication. You know, I'll tell you, media is hell. I'd rather be doing activism than media, but serving as the publisher of culture.com has been a true joy in my life. But I'm supported by more than 50 people who help run all of that stuff. If you want to contribute to fighting the SPLC, and it's very important that you do this, you go to defendgavin.com, you chip in a couple of bucks. This goes to the defense of Gavin. It doesn't go to Gavin. Gavin's been deplatformed. He doesn't have a PayPal account. So, you know, we have to have a company manage those funds that then go to the lawyer. It can't even be a fund that goes to Gavin or anything like that. So defendgavin.com. And my goal is actually to encourage other victims to sue the SPLC. The SPLC ought to be overwhelmed with legitimate lawsuits, not lawfare, but legitimate lawsuits for libel, defamation, and this sick coordination to deprive people of funds so that it actually does radicalize them. And that's what we're doing. And if you want to report a celebrity, a blue check mark as we call them, on Twitter, and you don't think that Twitter's going to listen to them, we will listen to you at verifiedbullies.com. Verifiedbullies.com, you can insert a tweet. We have a computer program that screenshots that tweet, archives that tweet, and displays that tweet inside of categories of the anti-right hate that is going on Twitter. And because of the relationships I have in Silicon Valley, I'm able to flex those muscles, and we're able to draw public attention to it through it being on the front page of verifiedbullies.com. But also behind the scenes, I use some of my network to make sure that these actually get reported. And you know, I'm just so grateful that that you had me on. Oh, and obviously my personal site, alialexander.org, alialexander.org. If you want to see what I'm up to. I don't have much time for personal updates, but these fights have become the fights of my life. And I'm so grateful to be in a position where I have network and friends who put me on air to talk about these issues. And frankly, to have a savings account that has allowed me to return to being an activist, which is what I really like doing instead of being a GOP hack.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Ali. We're very proud to know you and very proud to support you. I'll put those sites up on my social media platforms and try to help you get them out there. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ali Alexander, you can find him on Twitter too, at Ali Alexander, or at Ali, right?
It's Ali. Yep.
At Ali. So follow him on Twitter. He does some great periscopes. And you know, I learn something every time I get the opportunity to watch one, because I came into politics late in my life. So that's it for the Rob Maness Show. Thanks a lot. I'm very grateful for Ali joining us tonight to help us sift through all the baloney and the BS about fake attacks, fake media stories, and the bullying of the powerful against normal, average, everyday citizens, not just other people that have power because they have money or position and those kinds of things. It's very important for all of us here in the United States as citizens to understand that we are not each other's enemy, regardless of our political views. We do not hate each other just because we disagree politically. Enough is enough. And if it takes these tactics and strategies that Ali's laid out tonight to get the job done, then that's what it takes. God bless you all, and join us next time on the Rob Maness Show.